I also looked closely at the other bearing, did some cleaning. I can't feel any play to talk of, but the surface on the inner ball looks a little kind of rough in areas, so decided to replace this one also. I'm going with a high-end SKF at the bottom since it's so hard to get to, and trying a cheapo brand at the top. That seems to be easier to replace in the future, so we'll see how they compare. We decided to repack the cylinder now that it's out, since I had already pulled the trigger on buying the seal kit for it. Even if the leak for coming out of it was very, very small. Had earlier had some tools, laser cut or water jet cut for some of the cylinders, and had one here also. On this one I had made a bridge. I thought I would undo this while it was still on the machine, but with it off the machine it would have been possible to have the full ring. Took some hammering and a pipe, but came undone without too much trouble. There was some damage to the top of the cylinder. I had cleaned that up earlier. That will be at the end of the video, a little from this winter. It was a little stubborn getting it out, but a little piece of pipe and some wiggling and it started moving. Once we had it all the way out, we brought it inside. Here you can see that the piston head was kind of loose, being able to move a little back and forth. And they had done a proper hammering for locking the piston head, so we struggled a little with that with different tools and trying to expand it enough to get it off. So it was a little bit of grinding, getting some burrs from in there, hammering, trying to expand it, removing some burrs, and after a few times it started coming undone quite easily. With it all the way off, the top of the cylinder could be removed, cleaned up the little damage we had done to the end of the shaft. Then it was about removing seals. I missed a little bit here and there, but it's quite simple. Just take note of where everything is, and usually I try to take all the pieces off and compare quickly with what's in the new kit, that I have the correct kit before breaking the seal. Here there was, you can see the damage. I actually used the rotary tool to clean it up a little where it had been a little damaged, prying the actual pressure seal out, and then here is the dust seal. It's not a steel reinforced one that's on a lot of other hydraulic pistons. It's just a rubber one that sits in kind of a groove, and I think water has gotten in there over time, and maybe this could be causing the small leak or helping out, because the surface is a little rough, but I tried cleaning it up a little. And then the special tool I had made in some previous video was too small to use here, so it was back to the screwdriver and pliers to fold the new seal over itself enough that it can be fitted in its groove. It was quite hard. It's a little beefier, so but eventually it popped into place as it should go. Here is the one thing that can be inserted the wrong way, because it's not, it has a support O-ring behind it, and here I'm checking with the one I pried out that I'm placing it the correct way before kind of folding it over and getting it to where it needs to be. A couple of fine screwdriver and some picks can be helpful. Then it's just popping it in place. The slide bushings, there are two of them. They looked a little different both in color and the way the opening in them was cut compared to the old one. And here I'm adding some really nasty sticky grease to the groove where the dust seal is gonna sit, so hopefully that will help out for a while, keeping water from getting in there. And as with all the others, folding it over and making sure it's seated fully in the groove. Tried a few taps, that wouldn't help. Put it on the floor and some weight on it. The O-ring that was sealing the piston head where it was sitting, that was kind of damaged, so maybe that could have caused a minor internal leak, but since we had tried that earlier and it had hardly fallen down at all with plugging the cylinder after sitting for a while, so it would have been very, very small. Added some Loctite now here, can't hurt. Putting it on there to have it a little more solid when working on the seals on the piston head itself. And they are quite stiff when they get this big, so instead of forcing them all the way over, there is also an O-ring behind it. We pulled out the knife when we had been able to pry both of them up and just cut them. Yeah, I'm not sure if it would be called an O-ring. It's kind of a square rubber support behind the actual seal, and these tend to want to be twisted when you get them all the way into the groove, and so that could be good to take care to make sure it's aligned all the way around. And I was also almost putting some paper in there. And the new actual seal was quite a struggle getting on there, because it got caught in the groove for the friction bushing, but the small screwdriver kind of gently getting one place over and then holding on for dear life with the tip of our oily fingers and keep sliding the screwdriver along, and eventually it popped all the way into its position. Then adding the two friction bushings, tried tapping it in place a little harder, and then making sure that the dimple we made was very close to, so that it can never start having that sloppy play it had when we undid it. Then we put it on there, put some cover on it because it needed a little help, a few gentle taps with the sledgehammer, and it slid right in. And before we started moving it around, we pushed it down and brought out the tool and started getting the threads to grab. Then it was back outside to mount it on the forks on the tractor and clamping it in place and tightening it back up. This one, I don't think when we pulled it apart it had any safety done to it, so we gave it a little mark there so it can never come undone. It was brought inside. We were gonna give it a little bit of new paint before reassembly. Some old footage where I removed some of that mangled metal on the top of the cylinder. Found that the chisel and hammer worked best removing some material. Also test fitted the cut tool. It didn't really want to go in there, so I had to, it was a little bit too small, so I had to open it up with a grinder a bit, but eventually it fit on there nicely.